I started learning knitting more than a year ago. Since then, I have had plenty of time to learn and discover this new hobby that has quickly become the one that brings me the most joy. Since my mother was a pattern maker in her youth, I grew up dreaming about being able to create my own clothes, but never found the courage to go for it. Knitting had finally opened this door for me, and I realized that what I wanted to do now was follow in my mother's footsteps and become a pattern maker myself. For that, though, I would have to know a lot more. And not just knitting, I wanted to learn how to crochet and how to sew. And so I set up on this new adventure and started learning how to crochet 5 months ago. I made some blankets for my cats and a shirt for my boyfriend, and decided then to challenge myself. I would create 1 crochet bag per month, each presenting different challenges and each following a theme, and make it a free video tutorial for everyone to enjoy. And so here we are, the first installment of this 1-year adventure that we can share together if you choose. With the first bag of this series, the Flora Purse. The theme for the Flora Purse was spring and, you guessed it, flowers. To celebrate the beginning of this series and mirror the rebirth of nature, I wanted to have a bag that was reminiscent of awakenings, of flowers and everything soft. And so its name came naturally, Flora, the Roman goddess of spring. Since until now I have only made basic open granny squares, the challenge for this bag was to make a different kind of granny squares to gently come out of my comfort zone. I pictured a flower granny square that I would make in a soft white and that would be open enough to reveal a soft pinkish beige lining under it. The purse would have a simple single crochet handle, and I would make a drawstring with little leaves at the end to close it and bring it all together. I looked online for a granny square pattern that would fit my design and found this video tutorial by Adore Crochet that is pretty but simple enough to not frighten me too much. I also liked that the border around the granny square is easily repeatable, so that if the granny square didn't fit the size I wanted, I could easily make it bigger just by repeating the pattern. For the yarn, I wanted to use drawstring, which I am using right now for my boyfriend's hexagon shirt. It's a blend of cotton, viscose and linen, and has this beautiful texture that reminds me of branches. I chose it in this pretty pearl white color to go with the fabric I had already bought for the lining, a gingham double gauze fabric that's reversible, as it will be seen both on the inside and the outside of the purse. Finally, for the green leaves, I decided to simply look through my stash to find something that would fit the color scheme, and I ended up choosing this other yarn from Drops that I had ordered in my beginnings but never used. It's the Drops Flora, a very fitting name, but not the best material. It's a wool and alpaca mix, which is very soft, but I would advise to use cotton for this, to not have the little hairs from the wool poking out. It does make the leaves look a bit fluffy, which is not a look you would want for leaves. And now that everything has been designed and chosen, it's time to start crocheting. For the materials for the bag you will need 66 grams of DK or lightweight yarn, around 1 gram of DK or lightweight yarn for the drawstring, a reversible fabric to use as a lining, a 3mm crochet hook for the drawstring, and a 5mm crochet hook for the bag. Not pictured here, but some other notions that you might need are a wool needle to weave in the ends, scissors to cut the yarn and thread, but also some thread and a tiny needle for the threads. First, you need to start by making 2 granny squares in the height and width of your choosing. As I said earlier, I will myself be following a tutorial for the granny square part of the bag, so I won't go too much into details about this part, as I just don't want to copy a video that already exists. You can find a link to the video I used in the description box below. If the square isn't big enough to your liking once you are done following the tutorial, you can just repeat the rows 6 and 7 until it is. Since I used a hook that was bigger than the recommended one, the pattern as it was the right size for my bag. Once you have your 2 granny squares done, you can start making the handle. I grabbed my yarn and chained until the width of the strap was wide enough for my liking, starting again once or twice just to make sure, and started to do some simple single crochet. I wanted my handle to go around the granny squares and be long enough so that the bag could be worn as a crossbody bag. But since that was my first bag, I made it too short without realizing it. I wrongly thought that it would stretch a lot with blocking and that it would also stretch a lot while wearing it with things weighing the bag down. It does not. Oh well, if it wants to be a shoulder bag this will be. Now, time for the drawstring. For this drawstring, you will chain the length appropriate for your own bag. The length of the drawstring should be twice the width of your bag, plus a little more so that each end of the drawstring falls down a little bit in the front. Once you have a chain long enough to your liking, you will simply do 1 row of single crochet for the cord. I looked up a ton of different ways to make a drawstring since I'm more used to knitting and would have made the simple I-cord for this, but in crochet I found this version to be the easiest, and it's probably not the best, but it works. Once your first and only row is done, you will add your first leaf at the very end of the row. To make a leaf, simply chain 8 stitches and follow this pattern. 1 single crochet in the first stitch, 1 half double crochet in the second stitch, 1 double crochet in the third stitch, 2 double crochets in the same stitch space, the fourth stitch. One double crochet in the fifth stitch, one half double crochet in the sixth stitch, and 1 single crochet in the seventh and last stitch. Since those stitches are ordered from smallest to largest to smallest again, this will make a very easy wave-like pattern that you can now simply repeat on the other side to finish your leaf. And if it's not perfect and you struggle to read your work and you're not sure that you have made the right stitch at the right place, don't stress about it too much. Leaves are never perfect in nature, so that's just added realism. Now is the time for you to go wild. Add as many or as little leaves as you want on your drawstring. Simply slip stitch anywhere you want a leaf to be to attach your yarn. Chain 8 and repeat the leaf pattern. You should now have 2 granny squares for the size of your bag, 1 strap and 1 drawstring. Well, now is the time to sew all of it. I personally started by sewing the handle to 1 square by having one of the ends of the handle right at the corner of a square before seaming the 3 sides of the square. I then did the same to the other square before sewing the handle shut. You could also completely sew the handle shut first and then sew it to the squares. This is very much to your liking. Since this was my first time doing it, I tried it like that and it worked out fine. My advice though would be to always try to keep the right side of the square facing you so that you can pass your needle through the loop that is closest towards you on the square and through the loop that is farthest from you on the handle. So basically, you're passing your needle through the outside loops of both panels. This will ensure that you have a completely invisible join. I know this is the part everyone likes the least, but I actually find it quite relaxing. I like to watch something or listen to an audiobook while I hand sew, and this time was no different as I caught up back on some videos I had missed from the YouTubers I follow. I'm curious though, what do you like to do while you hand sew or even crochet or knit? Are you more of a watcher kind of person or more of a listener? For me, it really depends on the task and how focused I need to be to not make that many mistakes. At some point, you'll be done sewing, which means that, congrats, you're almost done. Now comes more sewing. Realistically, you could stop here and you would have a bag that is pretty and wearable enough. But if you want your bag to last longer and be more durable, which is what we want because we are all environmentally responsible creators, you will want to line your bag. This will make it more sturdy, and I promise you it isn't as hard as you think it is. And it's very important, especially for the Flora Purse, since a big point of its design is that you can see the lining under the holes created by the granny squares. The main thing is to remember that you can always rip off the seams of the lining and do it again, if it doesn't work out like you want it. And it does not need to be perfect, just good enough to be a lining. What I did was this. First, you want to get the drawstring through the bag before sewing in the lining. This will ensure that when you close the bag, the drawstring is inside between the granny square and the lining. So what I did was pull the first end of the drawstring through the sixth space created by the granny square design, then through the third, then the first. I then did the exact same thing on the other side, pulling it through the first space, then the third, the sixth, the 8th, the 11th, and the 13th space. Then back up to the front, in the first space on the other side of the square, then through the third, and then the 6th again. You want your drawstring to go through the second to last row of your granny square. The counting doesn't need to be accurate. The idea is just to go through one space from one side and come back through another space from the other side, so that when you pull on the drawstring, the bag is easily closed. Then it was time to really get to the lining part. I first washed my fabric and I can only advise you to do the same. This step is very important if you plan to wash your bag at some point, because fabric can shrink down on the first wash, so by doing it beforehand, you make sure that you're working with a size that it's going to stay at. There are some fabrics that tend to shrink down more than others, so for some fabrics you might not need to wash them, but if you don't want to look up that information every time you're using fabric, just put it through the wash and you'll be sure to be fine. I then ironed my fabric just a little to get rid of the biggest creases, and it was ready to be handled. I took the bag's measurements and wrote down its height and width. I then traced that rectangle onto my fabric 2 times, once for the front and once for the back of the lining. You want those rectangles to be next to one another because you will just fold the fabric in half in the middle. So you want the big rectangle that is created with the 2 smallest to be double the size of the height of your bag. I then added around this rectangle 2 centimeters to have some seam allowance and be sure that every edge of the fabric would be nice and smooth. I then cut the fabric, folded it again by following the lines I had drawn, and ironed it to make sure that the fabric would stay in place. So to be more precise here, you will fold down the seam allowance that you have created to have nice edges. Then you will fold the fabric in half to create the bottom of the bag. You can now simply make a seam on both of the sides of your folded rectangle, making sure that you leave an opening at the top for the opening of your bag. My advice here is to double or triple or even quadruple your thread to make sure that your sewing is sturdy enough to stay in place. To be completely honest with you, I was sick when I recorded this, and I completely could have done a better job with this seam. But I was really tired and I really wanted this bag done. So this comes to show, you really do not need to have a perfect seam, because that isn't that good of a seam. And you know what? My bag is still a bag and it is still in one piece. Anyways, once you are done, you will turn your fabric inside out and put your bag inside it. You will then make sure that you leave enough of the bag at the top so that one stitch is visible throughout. And you will start sewing around your bag, making sure that you pass your needle through the fabric and through the bag in itself. Also, please make sure that you don't sew on the drawstring, otherwise you won't be able to close the bag once you're done, or you will just rip your seam while closing the bag. You will make a seam around your bag and make sure that it's nice and closed before cutting your thread. Again, I don't think I did the best of jobs here, but it works. And the seam will probably rip one day, but who cares? I'll just sew it again. That's the joy of being able to make your own things. You will now turn your bag inside out again, and voila! The Flora Purse is done. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I really loved making this bag. I did make some mistakes that I very much learned from, but I cannot wait to put all of that learning to practice for next month's bag. Now, on to see if I like the editing process just as much. If you are making this bag, please tag me in your photos or your videos. You can find all of my socials on the screen. Even though I didn't make the granny square myself, this is my first ever somewhat pattern that I have shared publicly, and I would absolutely love to see what you create with it. Also, since this is my first video on this channel, please don't hesitate to give me your thoughts and feelings on the tutorial, the video. I would love to read your comments. As a tiny little spoiler, I will give you a clue as to next month's theme in the next chart. See you next month. Au revoir.